All right, you all may be seated. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here on time. We are ready to resume the trial of State of Georgia versus Edrick Faust, SU 24. CR 0547. Is the state ready?
State's ready, Judge.
Is the defense ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. You may call your first witness, Mr. Yellowman-Shilley.
Your Honor, we would continue with the testimony of Mr. Brian Grove from the ATF. Mr. Grove, I would just remind you that you continue to be under oath, sir. As we finished yesterday's questioning, I think we had reached the point at which you had discussed fire dynamics with the jury and the three pillars or the three legs as you described them regarding what it takes to create a fire. Did you, and we established that you had received contact and a request to assist in this particular case. As part of that request, did you receive any information about the case?
I did.
Okay. And did you review that information?
I did.
As part of your analysis, did you conduct any testing based on that information?
Yes.
All right. And you generated a report. Is that correct, sir?
I did.
All right. Did you also generate a PowerPoint as a demonstrative aid in order to assist with your testimony?
I did.
All right. Judge, if I could show Mr. Cruz, and then after that, approach Mr. Grove. Mr. Grove, I'm going to hand you what's been shown to Mr. Cruz and what's marked the State's Exhibit 97. Do you mind taking a look at that and tell me if you recognize what it is?
I do. It's a.
What is it?
It's a thumb drive that you had me initial this morning before court.
And have you had an opportunity to review the contents of that thumb drive?
I have.
And what is contained on the thumb drive?
It's pretty much figures from directly from my report.
Okay. And is it in the form of a PowerPoint?
It is.
And is that the PowerPoint you created?
Yes.
And Judge, I'd move to tender 97 just as a demonstrative aid.
All right, any objection, Mr. Cruz?
Yes, lack of foundation and hearsay.
Okay, I'm going to overrule that objection. You may proceed.
And Mr. Grove, I'm going to go to the second slide in the presentation. What are we seeing here?
So that's figure one from my
Your Honor, I have a motion.
All right.
Outside the prison.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll go back into the jury room, please don't discuss the case. All right, you all may be seated. Mr. Yellowman-Shilley, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Grove, the question I asked you before we paused there was, do you recognize what is in slide one here?
I do.
Okay, and what is that?
That's figure one from my report. It's the front of the house. We would call that side A.
Okay, and so side A would be the front. Is that what you just said?
That's correct. And if you go in a counterclockwise direction, side B would be to the left. Side C would be a clockwise direction. Side B would be on the left of the house. Side C would be in the back, and side D would be on the right of that picture. When I look at that, what it's telling me is that there was some soot inside the attic space, and it was pressurized such that it pushed that soot out the soffit vents on the front of the house. You can see soot stain on the brick, as well as a little bit on the gable vent on side D of the house.
Okay. And I'd like to take you to slide number 2. I guess it's technically slide 3 because the first one was a cover sheet, but we're going to go forward to that. Can you tell me what you see here?
So that's side C of the house or the rear of the house. There's a tarp over what is presumably a hole in the roof, as well as some damage to the soffit. And boarded up is the window to the room of fire origin.
And I'm going to go forward to the next slide. Can you tell me where this still image came from and also what you see here?
So this was a video that I was able to watch after I wrote my report. This is a screen capture from that video, and it shows a good view of the tarp So clearly there's no ceiling in this room. The ceiling's collapsed, as well as some pretty extensive damage to the roof over the window in the room of fire origin.
And what do you see in the window itself?
So regarding the window, the glazing has been broken out in the top part of the window, but is intact in the lower part of the window.
And I'm going to go forward to here. What do we see here?
This is a sketch showing the house. The room of origin is in the upper left-hand corner, labeled bedroom number 3.
And this next image, what are we seeing here?
An interior shot of the room of fire origin from the perspective of the door. You can see that there's some collapse of the ceiling joists, as well as some pretty extensive thermal damage in the upper part of the room, including some consumption of the mattress.
Okay. And our next slide here, what are we seeing?
So that's a close-up view of the bed. You can see that the wood part of the frame, while it has some soot staining, is still pretty much intact. There's some gypsum wallboard from the ceiling that has collapsed onto the bed. There was some consumption of bedding materials.
Okay. And Your Honor, the next slide that we're going to show has some sensitive information on it.
All right.
And Mr. Grove, what are we seeing in this slide?
This is figure 6 from my report. It's the room of fire origin looking down at floor level. And what's important there is the lack of damage to the carpet, as well as all the generally combustible materials in that room. So it tells me while there was some heat damage to the upper part of the room, the upper part of the walls, the ceiling, we really didn't have a lot of fire damage down below. And so that tells me that that room did not transition through flashover. There was not a fully developed fire that was burning in that room for an extensive period of time.
Okay. And I'm going to go forward to the next picture, but then I do want to ask you some questions about some of the words that you just used in that response. I'm going forward to the next slide. The sensitive information has been removed from the screen.
So this is the range in the kitchen, and what's important here is that all 4 of the what we call infinite control switches, or the knobs on the stove, are turned to the high position.
Okay. And backing up to something you said about the damage in the room, where it was significant, where it wasn't significant, you used the word flashover. Can you please tell the jury what that means as it relates to fire dynamics?
So a good definition that ATF uses and teaches our investigators is that it's a transition from a fire in a room to the whole room being on fire. And it's something that we as fire protection engineers really try to prevent when we design buildings, because post-flashover conditions deteriorate very quickly. There's a lot of damage and a lot of threat to property and people, as well as making the job of a fire investigator pretty difficult.
Okay. And if we could, I know that we backed up a little bit. You had testified already about what you saw in this image. I'm going to take you forward to the next image. What are we seeing here?
So this is a close-up of the left front burner, and we see some burn material around the element.
All right. As it relates to the specific requests that you received in the request to assist in this case, were there particular questions or scenarios that you were asked to consider and test?
Yes, one of the hypotheses that was presented to me was that, and this is coming from Special Agent Will Perdue, that a blanket was taken out of the bedroom, placed on that element that was in the high position, and the element was used to ignite the blanket, and then the blanket was transported back to the room, to the bedroom, or the room of fire origin, to set the bed on fire.
Okay. And as it relates to kind of those two things that you just mentioned, I'll start first with the ignition of a blanket on a stove burner element. Is that something you tested?
It is.
Okay. And how did you go about testing that, given the information that you already knew from having received information about the investigation?
So we were told that the item that was most likely ignited was a chenille type fabric. So I did an internet search and purchased what I considered to be similar fabrics. I selected 3 different materials, synthetic materials like polyester, and then natural materials like a cotton and I think a rayon, which is a bamboo type of fabric.
Okay. And as far that's the selection of the blanket. As far as the ignition on a stove burner eye, what did you do in order to test that scenario?
We ran 3 different types of tests, but regarding ignition, we cut the fabrics that I purchased into roughly 1 by 1 foot squares and then placed them on the burner. We laid them in a flat configuration, and then we also bunched them up and put them bunched up on the burner.
I'm going to go forward to this next slide. This is a cover sheet, but what does it say?
Range tests.
Okay. And I'm going for range test. Would that be referring to the stove eye?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to go forward to the next slide. This is test A. What does that refer to?
So I labeled my tests A, B, and C. A is just the ignition test with the 1 by 1 foot square fabric samples.
Okay. What am I seeing here?
This is just an example of one of the samples that was cut. It happens to be 100% cotton.
And I'm going forward. Is that the approximate size of each of the samples that y'all cut for placement?
It is. I think in my report I said roughly plus or minus 2 inches.
What is this depicting?
So this is an ignition of one of the samples, and this happened 1 second after being placed on the burner. So we put that sample on the burner. Within a second, it ignited.
And which sample would this have been?
Looks like this is what we call I'm going to call that RACO sample.
Okay. I'm going to go forward to the next slide. What am I looking at here?
This is from test 6. So we used 2 different stoves in these tests. One was manufactured by Hot Point. The other was GE. This is also a burner in the high position, and this is 2 seconds after one of the samples, and it's a different sample than you saw before, but being placed on the burner.
All right. And I'm going to go forward to the next slide. You mentioned placing samples on the eye of the burner kind of in different ways. What are we seeing here?
So this is one of the samples. Rather than being placed flat on the burner, we crumpled it up and put it on the burner, and it took about 4 seconds to ignite. And the trend that we saw was if you crumpled it, generally it took a little longer to ignite than if it was laid flat. And I think that's just because there's less surface area available for that textile to come into contact with the burner element.
Okay. Go forward. What were tests B in your scenario as it relates to the blanket and the burner elements?
Test B, we were looking at ignition, but we were also looking at upward flame spread. The idea if someone were to take a blanket or whatever it was and hold it over the burner and then carry it like this, what might that look like?
Okay. In general terms, can you describe the rate at which flames spread on material that's stretched vertically as opposed to one that is not?
Sure. Upwards flame spread, or what we call concurrent flame spread, is much faster than downward flame spread, approximately 2 orders of magnitude. And then we can also think of lateral flame spread. If you lay this material flat on the ground, how does the flame spread across something flat on the ground? And it's also very slow compared to upwards flame spread.
Do you mind talking about what orders of magnitude means?
Sure. It's so let's say it's and I'm going to draw some numbers here. Maybe 100. Actually, I'm not going to do that. It's just, it's much quicker. So rather than say 1 centimeter per second, it might be 100 centimeters per second or something like that.
Okay. What am I seeing in this figure?
This was our experimental setup for phase B.
Okay. And what is this table that we're seeing now?
So these were the 12 tests that were run in the B phase. Each test was done in duplicate. You can see in the second column or the middle column the 6 different types of materials that we tested. And then the last column on the right is how that material reacted. And so if it's a synthetic, or I'm sorry, if it's a natural fiber like a cotton, it burned very readily, very vigorously, and we had a relatively high heat release rate. We talked about that in units of kilowatts, so we had a lot of kilowatts, basically a large fire. And if it was a synthetic material, we did not get such a large fire. A lot of those materials dripped, and it was a very slow upward flame spread. And I think one of them actually might have gone out. Yeah, ignition wasn't sustained in test 14.
Okay. And I'm going to go forward to the next slide now. What are we seeing here?
So this is 2 minutes post-ignition. What we would do is take the bottom of that fabric, move it over to the burner element while it's hanging. Once we get ignition, we let it go, and then we just document the upward flame spread, as well as we measure the heat release rate or the size of that fire. And so you're looking at an image that's 2 minutes post-ignition.
Okay. What are we seeing here?
This is a different sample, but you're looking at 1 minute and 12 seconds post-ignition. So this is a comparatively very intense fire.
And what do we see here?
This is a synthetic fiber, so it does not burn as readily, particularly when we're looking at upward flame spread. This is 2 minutes post-ignition, and you can see it's a very small fire, a lot of drips to the ground, and it's hard to get that flame to move up the fabric.
Go forward to the next slide, and that puts us at test C. What were test C as it relates to your analysis of some of the scenarios related to this case?
So test C, we're looking at ignition, but also lateral flame spread across the fabric if we were to bunch it up. So if someone, rather than carry it like this, and I'm using 2 hands to hold it, they would maybe cradle it in their arms, and so it's kind of bunched up. And rather than having someone hold it, we just put it on the ground.
What do we see here?
So this sample has been ignited, and it's burning on the ground. I labeled this as a setup photo.
Okay. Going forward to the next slide, what is this table?
These are the 12 tests that were done in phase C. We have the same 6 textiles, and the tests were conducted in duplicate. And then on the right-hand column, I'm looking at the peak heat release rates that were measured, and those were noticeably smaller than when we held that textile up vertically. And the synthetics actually performed generally a little better than the natural fibers in this configuration, which is different than when the fabric was held vertical.
Okay. Going forward to the next slide, what are we seeing here?
This is 2 minutes post-ignition. This would be a natural fiber, and that's what the fire looked like.
Go forward again. What are we seeing here?
This is about 7.5 minutes post-ignition. This is a synthetic fiber, so that's a much larger fiber than a much larger fire than the natural materials.
Okay. And I'm going to go forward to the next slide now. Fire development analysis. What does that mean?
So one of the questions that was asked of me was to figure out how this fire, if it was started on the bed, would grow in the room to the point where we get flames through the roof such that they were observed by firefighters. what's the chronology of those events, and then how long might that take to occur. So building a fire timeline for this case.
Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Kinston test?
Yeah, so the Kinston tests were conducted in 2001. It was a research project using 4 houses in Kinston, North Carolina. Those houses were, I think, in a floodplain. FEMA bought out the owners, so the city was going to destroy them, and we were able to run some tests on them. They were modest-sized houses, probably about the size of this house. And what we were looking at was if you were to spill a lot of gasoline in a house and then ignite it and allow that fire to progress through flashover, be a fully developed fire, meaning there's flames blowing out the windows and the door, and we allowed the flames to go through the roof, and then in some cases the roof actually collapsed into the house. Are there any indicators left over that gasoline was used? And it turns out that's not the case at all. Gasoline only burns for maybe 20 or 30 seconds when it's spilled. So all that damage to the house is from the contents in the structure itself.
Okay. And so we talked yesterday a little bit about fuel limitation and ventilation limitation. Can those factors affect the rate at which a fire spreads?
Absolutely. So fuel-limited fires, I have a couch burning out in my front yard. That fire can only get as large as the amount of vapor that I can burn. If I take that same couch and I move it into my living room, it starts out as a fuel-limited fire. It's somewhat small. It's using the oxygen in that living room, in that space. But if the fire doesn't have access to additional air or additional oxygen, it becomes ventilation limited, meaning the size of the fire is dictated by how much fresh air we can get into that space. And with an open door or breaking a window or something like that, fires generally don't do as much damage and sometimes go out on their own.
As it relates to the Kinston tests, how did y'all set the fuel factors and the ventilation factors in that case?
So we were really just trying to get fires that developed very quickly. We had fuels that were readily ignited. I think we had a stuffed chair. We took wood pallets. We stuffed polyurethane foam in them. Some of the, excuse me, some of the fires were, we had 8 gallons of gasoline used to get the fuels that were already in that space involved. Others we ignited without gasoline. So a readily combustible large fuel load, as well as an open exterior door, and we had some open windows in the space. And we also had access from the living room, which was the room of fire origin, to the rest of the house, except for the kitchen. So really optimal conditions to allow a fire to grow very readily and very intensely.
All right. Would you like me to get you a glass of water?
Nope, I've got this right
You got
here.
it? Okay. All right. Oh, thanks. I'm going to go forward to the next slide. Can you show me or tell me what we're seeing here?
So we ran 4 tests in 4 different houses. This is test house 1. 1 and 3 were non-accelerated. 2 and 4 were accelerated. I only used 1 and 3 in this analysis.
Okay. And what do you mean by accelerated?
Accelerated with 8 gallons of gasoline.
Okay. And I'm going to go forward to the next slide. What are we seeing here?
This is typical for all the tests, but it's the fuel load inside the living room. So you see the stuffed chair, you see the pallets with some polyurethane foam on them. And then next to that, you see a futon. So that is the room of fire origin with a pretty substantial fuel load. And then in some of the bedrooms, we had pallets as well for some additional fuel.
All right. Going forward to the next slide. What are we looking at here?
So this is test house 3. This is post flashover. We have a fully developed fire. We've vaporized so much fuel that there's not enough air inside the structure to burn it all, so we see a lot of burning taking place outside the structure. At this point, we might have a hole through the roof, or it just could be the asphalt shingles that are burning. We had cameras set up on the front and back of the house, and people monitoring those cameras and kind of dictating what they saw during the fire.
Going forward to the next slide. Can you talk to me just about some of the key timelines in the Kinston test?
Yeah, so this is test one. These are observations at the rear of the house. I actually took a lot of this data from a previous case that I testified in Atlanta, and a lot of this data comes from that report. But this was me reviewing those videos, so using my eyes to see what I saw in the video as well as hearing what the folks next to the camera were, what their observations were. I have time in the first column, so the first row is 3 minutes and 15 seconds will be the time, and the observation is that there's smoke visible above the house. 3.5 minutes, there's flashover in the living room, and this is someone at the rear of the house, video at the rear of the house. 10 minutes, we have fire out a rear window and door. 13 minutes, smoke venting around a chimney. We get to 25 minutes, and we have flames coming out around the chimney. So what I was doing here was kind of using these as a baseline. How long might it take to get flames through a roof under really optimal conditions? And in test one, it took 25 minutes.
All right. And after we walk through the Kinston test, I am going to ask you some questions about how the conditions at this particular scene compared to the Kinston conditions.
So these are just observations at the front of the house. And once again, at 25 minutes and 20 seconds, I wrote that the porch is fully involved and there's fire venting out the roof above the living room. And that is the room of fire origin in this particular fire.
Going forward, another slide. This is Kinston test 3. What are the key time points here?
So the same process, but at 20 minutes and 30 seconds, I wrote fire appears to be venting through the roof. In some cases, it's kind of hard to tell whether it's flames through the roof or the asphalt shingles are burning. But at 22 minutes and 30 seconds, there was significant flame venting through a hole in the roof above the kitchen.
I'm going to go forward one more slide. What are we looking at in this table, and what are the key points?
These are observations at the front of the house at 21 minutes and 30 seconds. I wrote that fire appears to be venting through the roof in the area above the living room.
Okay. We've talked about the conditions that y'all set up in the Kinston test. How were the conditions at 160 Fawn Drive different from the Kinston test?
They're different in terms of the fuel load. In that space, we only had a bed, which is a decent fuel. The mattress, they burn pretty well, but probably not as well as an upholstered couch or something like that. A bed's a flat surface, whereas a couch has some vertical surfaces, and they tend to get involved a little quicker. But the biggest difference would be ventilation. So in the Kinston test, we had an open front door, we had open windows in the house. In this particular case, the room of origin was just the bedroom. My understanding from reading some firefighter statements was that when they made entry into the house, it was smoky in the main living area, but they couldn't find flame until they kicked in or broke in the bedroom door, and then there were some flames up high. So the big difference would be ventilation, where closed door and closed window, so that can really affect how long it takes a fire to develop.
Okay. Can you talk to me about fire spread to an attic and the methods in which that can occur?
Yeah, so in this case, I was presented with the theory that a blanket was ignited on the burner. That blanket was transported to the bedroom, whether it was held like this, 2 hands on it, or kind of cradled in someone's arms. You could ignite that blanket and bring it into the bedroom. That blanket was then put on the bed, or maybe at the foot of the bed, maybe igniting the bed clothing, maybe igniting the pillows. And I say maybe because we just don't know. So fire grows on the bed. At some point, whoever did this left that bedroom, and at some point, that interior door or the window was shut, depending on how someone left. So now this fire is growing in this compartment with the door and window closed. It forms a hot upper layer in that compartment. An unknown amount of time goes by. we can start to stress out the upper part of the window. We know that heat rises, so if we think of heat soaking or materials absorbing heat, it's going to happen at the ceiling much more readily than at the floor, the upper part of the walls rather than the lower part of the walls. So the upper part of the window rather than the lower part of the window, but that window is going to heat soak. We're going to induce stresses in the glass, and at some point that glass can begin to crack, and eventually those cracks can lead to pieces of that window falling out. Sometimes windows fall out all at once. Sometimes you get little holes and pieces kind of come out piecemeal. But now we're getting some fresh air into that space, so the fire can now grow again because it's getting the piece that it was missing, which is fresh air. And then we look at fire spread into the attic, and that can occur in one of two ways. Once the window's broken, we may get flames out the window, which hit the bottom of the soffit. If there's a soffit vent directly above the window, then we have pretty much direct access for flames to get into the attic. If not, then we have to burn through that wood, but still we can get flames into the attic. If flames didn't spread through the window, we could have had failure of the gypboard ceiling, which we know occurred because the ceiling was on the ground, the insulation was on the ground, on the floor. And then flames can get into the attic through the interior of the house, through the ceiling. Either way, we're getting flames into the attic. Now we're going to burn the bottom of the wood material on the roof, anything else that happens to be up there. It's a nice vertical surface, so we can get some pretty good flame spread up that vertical surface. Air for that fire would come in through the soffit vents or through the window and the hole in the ceiling. So that's kind of what the inlet is, or the supply of the air. And then the exhaust would be the gable vents, and at some point the hole in the roof itself. So once we get fire into the attic, things can happen fairly quickly. In the Kinston test, it was about 10 to 17 minutes of burning in the attic before we had a hole through the roof. But that was kind of the chronology of events. So fire developing in the room, does it spread into the attic through the interior of the house, or does it spread into the attic through the exterior of the house, through the window and into the soffit? And then I tried to look at each one of those things independently and, where possible, assign some times.
Were you asked anything about the possibility of bed ignition by placement of a flaming item on the bed?
Yes.
Okay. And did you make efforts to test that particular scenario or hypothesis?
No. So we have a lot of test data that we have for other cases, other research projects. So I used data that was conducted prior to this case. This particular slide is burning on a queen-size bed. It was done for a criminal case in which it's believed that flaming paper was put on the bed, and that was used to ignite the bed.
Okay. I'm going to go forward to the next slide. And what are we seeing here?
So this is the queen-size bed with the bed clothing still burning. This is what appears to be a synthetic fiber, and we're looking at a very slow flame spread across the flat surface of the bed. Now we're burning some of the material hanging on the edge. But the important thing here is this is 30 minutes after placement of the flaming paper. So this is pretty atypical. It's a very long, what we call incubation period, meaning that the fire just takes a long time to get going. But it can certainly happen.
I'm going to take you to the next image. What are we seeing here?
This is 50 minutes after placing that paper on the bed.
And the next image?
This is 58 minutes after placement of the paper. And this fire really got going once the pillows became involved. The drapes you see are...
I'll back up one
Yep.
slide.
If you back up before, you see there's some drapes there. It's a nice vertical fuel surface which burns very readily. So when you go to the next slide, you can see they've already been consumed. This is a very large fuel limited fire, but it took 58 minutes to get to this point. But I should note this is atypical. This is, in this test series, I think like 12 tests were run, and this was by far the longest. Some of them are maybe like 4 or 5 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. it all depends on where that flaming piece of paper is placed.
And so you said it was fuel limited in the sense that it was the bed. What were the ventilation factors in this particular test?
So this was done on one of our burn room floors, and that bed has access to all the air that it needs to burn. It is 100% limited by the amount of fuel that can be vaporized.
Okay. And so this would be a ventilation-rich environment, I guess, is that?
It's a way to look at it, but air is not inhibiting, air for combustion is not inhibiting the size of the fire.
Okay. What are we seeing here?
This was another case that we ran tests for. I believe this was in Moscow, Idaho, and the issue here was fire timeline. It was an apartment complex. There was a bedroom being the room of fire origin, and the fire was discovered by a person in the unit above the first floor there. So he ends up seeing flames coming up past his window, and he calls 911. But the important thing here is that prior to failure of the glazing, you can get leakage around the window. So oftentimes neighbors will report smelling smoke, something's burning, but we don't know where it's coming from. And this is just an example of how that can happen.
Okay. And what are we seeing here?
This is an infrared image of that same window, and it shows the heat soaking to the top part of the window relative to the bottom pane, which is relatively cool. Blue is 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and red is 100 degrees Celsius. So not really that high of a temperature, but it just shows you where the heat soaking occurs, which would be similar to what would have happened in our space.
Okay. And 100 degrees Celsius, can you quickly convert that
12 degrees Fahrenheit.
to 12? And
Yeah.
is there anything significant about that temperature for common everyday purposes?
Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but that's just the scale we had on the image.
Okay. So the bottom portion, I think you said, was approximately 68 degrees Celsius, while the top portion was, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, while the top portion was 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that image is really just showing what happens when you have a fire not right up against the window, it's somewhere else in the room, and the heating by that window is radiation from the flame directly itself, as well as the hot layer that's formed. Had there been a couch right up against the window, that would look dramatically different.
Can you, and that's the end of the slideshow, but I do have some more questions for you. Can you talk to the jury about the ways in which, in a ventilation-limited environment, HVAC systems can affect a fire and its development?
Yeah, so we had a case in West Virginia. There was a fire in a bedroom. Neighbors reported smelling smoke throughout the morning. No one could determine where this fire was. It was a suburban single-family house type neighborhood. A person reading meters happened to be walking by the front of the house and then saw flaming debris on the floor of the living room through glass panes on either side of the door. 911 was called. Shortly after getting to the scene, a window in the bedroom broke out, and then we ended up getting some of the roof, I think, involved. But what was unique to that scene was that we had 2 holes burned in the floor. And so we were using the holes to try to get an understanding of the fire timeline. And so we studied how long it might take to burn these holes in the ground, or through the floor. On one of those tests, it took like 2 hours and 12 minutes. And so it takes a while to form the hole, and then the window broke out subsequent to the hole. So we know that sometimes window breakage can take a long time. And then there was 3 scenarios we ran with the ventilation. One, we had no ventilation. The second, the fan was running 100% of the time. And then the third, the fan was cycling. I think it was on for 10 minutes, off for 15 minutes, and I can talk about those as well if you like.
And if you would, please talk about how those differing cycles affected the fire development.
So with no mechanical ventilation, no HVAC, the fire was started on the bed or on the ground near the bed clothing. Fire grew for about 5 minutes. Pretty good increase in fire size. It ran out of air. It became ventilation limited and went out. So limited damage to the materials inside the bedroom. No holes in the floor. One of the scenarios was HVAC running all the time. So we're just blowing air into this room through a simulated HVAC system. Fire is lit, and rather than going into decay because it's running out of air, it's able to continue burning. We actually ended up getting some small flames through the ceiling assembly. We put those tests out, and we had some pretty extensive damage in that space, but no holes in the floor. Fire cycling on and off, so when it's on, the fire's growing. When it's off, the fire begins to go into decay. We ended up running through 6 cycles of that before we got a hole through the floor. So HVAC can certainly lend itself to a longer duration event prior to maybe a window breaking out. So in a scenario where a fire might die out because it's going to lose air, HVAC can kind of keep it alive until a window fails and you get a lot of air into the space, and then things can really take off.
Did you draw any conclusions about the viability of the scenario that was presented to you in this case?
Can you be more specific?
Sure. What, if any, conclusions did you draw regarding the ways in which chenille fabrics can ignite in the scenario put before you in this case?
So chenille fabrics, they can certainly ignite on a stove when it's set on high. That blanket can be transported to the bedroom, and a fire certainly started that way on the bed.
Okay. As it relates to the Kinston test versus the West Virginia scenario that y'all tested, are the environmental factors, fuel load as well as ventilation being limited or not limited, in this case, closer to the Kinston test or closer to the West Virginia scenario?
Definitely closer to the West Virginia scenario. The Kinston tests were a good starting point. If I'm really trying to get an aggressive fire very quickly.
Objection, Your Honor. Undisclosed expert opinion. We don't have anything about a West Virginia test in the documents provided to us from the state.
All right, Mr. Yellowman, Mr. Yellowman, you care to respond to the, well, what is your objection, Mr. Cruz? Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, Your Honor. Undisclosed expert conclusion. We don't have, in the documents provided to us, we don't have anything about a West Virginia test.
All right, thank you. Mr. Yellowman, any comment on the objection?
Your Honor, hold on one second.
All right.
I'm looking at Judge, I'm looking at page 16 of the report, and I may be referring to it by different terminology, but it's in the report.
Anything further, Mr. Cruz?
If I could approach Mr.
You may,
Cruz.
certainly.
I would stand by my objection. There was no disclosure of a West Virginia test.
Mr. Yellowman, your take on it is that it is in the report.
It's in the report. I might be referring to it by a different name based on my conversation with Mr. Grove, but all of the information that we just went over is in this.
The only thing
Yes, sir.
I'll ask, he makes it very clear for the jury what he's referring to as opposed to referring to it as a West Virginia test.
All right.
Based on what's been shared with us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cruz. I'm going to overrule the objection. You may continue.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Grove, I kind of lost where we were in the questioning. I think it was you were in the process of explaining the way the Kinston test was set up when we stopped. Is that right?
That's correct. So the Kinston tests were designed to get a very rapidly, very intense fire. We were not looking at how long it takes to get flames to the roof, but we had that information, so I used it. It took 20 to 25 minutes. That was kind of a starting point. And then I was able to look at some of the factors that might change that for this particular case in Athens, using some other data from previous cases. The West Virginia case, or the test that we ran with ventilation cycling on, off, or with ventilation on, off, or cycling, and what we found is if the ventilation's off, the fire goes out, doesn't put a hole through the floor. If it's on, we get flames, small flames through the ceiling prior to burning a hole through the floor, and if it cycles, we end up getting a hole through the floor. And it just happened in that case, the window broke out after the hole. So it's a good example of a long duration fire where window breakage does not occur right away, which, you know, sometimes that can happen. And I think the takeaway here is, if you ask me, hey, I start a fire in a living room and there's an open window, I can bracket that pretty tightly in terms of how long it'll take to get flames out that window. It might be like 4 to 8 minutes or something like that. If you close that window, it's a different story. It really depends on how long it takes that window to break. The Kinston tests were set up to burn very quickly. In this particular scenario, maybe that happened in terms of ignition of the bed, and maybe it didn't. If we're setting an incendiary fire, there's probably motivation to allow that fire to develop very quickly, but there's no saying for sure that occurred. Could have been a relatively ineffective ignition and early fire growth.
Okay. Judge, I don't think I have any other questions for Mr. Grove.
Cross-examination, Mr. Cruz.
Good morning, Engineer Grove.
Good morning.
I want to thank you for being here. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Did the prosecution ask you to prepare this report?
Yes.
Was it?
Well, so I was working for Special Agent Perdue, knowing that this case might go to court. The report is addressed to Special Agent Perdue, and it comes to the court that way.
Sure. So this report was prepared for the purposes of this litigation.
Correct.
When was the report requested? Just year. You can just give us a year.
I think 2024.
Were you aware that this fire happened in 2001?
Yes.
Okay. So you wouldn't have any reason to disagree with me that they asked you to conduct this test 23 years later.
Can you
Would you have any reason to disagree that you were asked to conduct this?
No.
You would agree that Mr. Faust was arrested on May 9th, 2024. Is that correct?
I don't know that.
You're not clear with that? Is it fair to say, and please correct me, have you ever visited the Deer Park neighborhood?
No.
Did you ever walk through Miss Baker's home?
No.
Did you see a video of a walkthrough of her home?
There were several short videos that I was able to look at, yes.
Okay, can you describe those videos for me?
It was dark, smoky. I focused on the ones in the bedroom.
Sure.
So it's just someone walking through with a camera, kind of looking around the bedroom.
Sure. Can you tell us the square footage of Miss Baker's home?
Ooh, in my report, I looked at the square footage from a website. I think it was used for taxation purposes in Athens, and was able to get an idea of what the square footage was. Off the top of my head, I think it was like 40 by 36 feet was the entire footprint of the house.
What is that? I chose law because I'm not good at math. So what is that if you give us that number?
Oh, in square footage? Well, let's do 40 times 30, so that's like 1,200 square feet.
Okay, excellent. What were the sizes? Excuse me. What was the size of the locations used for the test?
For which test?
I believe it was 4 Kingston tests. So we'll start with the 4 Kingston tests.
Yeah. I don't know the exact footage. The houses were probably a little bit smaller, but they were single-family houses, so living area, kitchen, a few bedrooms. I would say slightly smaller than the Athens house.
Do you have a copy of your report with you?
No, but I think I can probably get it.
I would like you to look at. Excuse me. Page 6 of 39, third paragraph, first sentence.
Your Honor, if we are refreshing his recollection with that, it probably needs to be marked for purposes of the record. It wouldn't go back with the jury, of course, but.
That's correct.
Forgive me, give me 1 second. Let the record reflect that I am marking excuse me. Let me get the proper title. Court's indulgence. I am marking Engineer Grove's report as Defense Exhibit 18.
All right, and this is the state's copy, though, is that right?
That's correct,
Okay.
Judge, but it's a printout of a PDF.
Okay. I mean, we can make a copy afterwards and give it back to the state and make this the exhibit if you want to, but I'll let you talk about that later. Go ahead.
You said page 6,
Of
third
39,
paragraph,
third paragraph,
sentence.
sentence 1.
Sentence 1. That says figure 12 shows the front of the house used in test 3.
Sentence 2.
In parentheses, the author does not have any pictures from test 1, end parenthesis.
May I see that report, please? Sentence 3.
Each house had a floor area of approximately 130 square meters, 1,400 square feet, based on scaling from photographs.
Okay, so the test house was 1,400 with the Kingston test. Is that correct?
That's what I'm approximating, yes.
Yes, sir. And all the information you used to conduct your testing was based on information that was told to, you said his name, Special Agent
Purdue.
So information told from someone to Special Agent Purdue, and then from Special Agent Purdue to you. Is that right?
Well, yeah, for background in the case, yes.
Sure.
But in the particular measurements of the house, I got that from tax records from Athens.
Fair. Just background.
Yeah,
Background of the case.
right. Background on the case, photos, and I guess his Detective Leadall's report.
Excellent. If some of the information that you received was incorrect, could it affect the outcome of your testing?
Sure.
So can you tell us what type of chenille blanket was used to start the fire? Was it a chunky knit chenille blanket? Was it a woven fringes chenille blanket? Was it a lightweight chenille blanket? Do you know that?
Yeah, I sure can. And we get this question fairly often where, a lot of times we don't know. So I got a variety of different fabrics. Some of them were really kind of thick and fuzzy, which chenille fabric is. Some were polyester, some were natural fibers. So I have no idea what the actual blanket was.
Yes, sir. As far as the mattress Ms. Baker had, do we know if it was an innerspring mattress, a foam mattress, a latex mattress, or a hybrid mattress?
I would say that it had springs that kind of popped out in the photographs, if I remember. But in terms of the materials in that mattress or any details on that mattress, I have no idea.
Yes, sir. Do you know the type of material Ms. Baker's bed frame was made out of?
It appeared to be wood.
Okay. What type of wood?
That I can't tell you. Was it a press board? I have no idea.
What about, do we know if it's cherry, oak, mahogany?
We sure don't.
What were the items in Ms. Baker's room that contributed to the size of the fire in her room? Do you know?
I'd say the primary fuel load was the bed itself, the mattress, maybe a little bit the box spring. There was some charring of the wood frame. I think in the report there's written notes that there's some consumption of parts of the frame. But you know, that was the bulk of the fuel load. Certainly fuels on the floor were generally in pretty good shape.
But do you know any of the other items outside of the bed that may have contributed to the fire?
Yeah, looking there were limited number of photos and sometimes fuels that might get involved weren't involved. So I would say the primary fuel is really where the bed itself and the bed clothing, whatever that might have been. If it were blankets, pillows can burn fairly well.
Do we know what the bed clothing, or were you provided the information?
No.
On the bed clothing. The Kingston test was done in August of 2001. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
But that had nothing to do with Ms. Baker's case. That was an independent test that you all conducted as an agency.
Yeah, that was a research project. That's right.
Your Honor, I would ask permission, if I may speak to the state, I would ask permission to use their demonstrative during the examination of this witness.
I'm going to let you have a conversation with the state. This is a good time actually for a restroom break. So I'm going to send you all to the jury room. Don't talk about the case.
Engineer Grove, during your examination with the state, they asked you about the HVAC system and the impact it could have when it's on and the impact it could have when it's off. Do you know whether Ms. Baker's do you know if Ms. Baker had an HVAC system?
It appears from the drawings and the tax documents that she did.
Okay. Do you know if it was on or off?
So the night of the fire, I think it was 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest point, and I think by like 8 a.m. it reached 60 or something like that. So one would think it was probably running, but I don't know.
Where exactly was the blanket placed on the bed?
I have no idea.
All right. Next slide, please. Do we know the size of the chenille blanket?
We don't.
Okay. Next slide, please. Do we know how the chenille blanket was placed on the stove?
We don't.
Okay. So these two photos we just looked at, these aren't specific to Ms. Baker's case, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely not. So when we conduct testing in the lab, we always say that we're running tests or experiments. We're not doing reconstructions or recreations. So no, these are specific to our tests. Now, what it shows is that a range of different materials on the high setting on the stove all ignite very readily.
Yes, sir. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, next slide. Okay. And you mentioned that you don't know the position, so we don't know if it was balled up on the stove, is that right?
We don't.
Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Now here I believe there's a test that was conducted in this, is it fair to call it a warehouse?
It's a lab. It's big though. It kind of looks like a warehouse, but it's a lab.
That's fair. And when this test was conducted, it was not conducted trying to replicate what would have taken place in Ms. Baker's home as far as space-wise.
Yeah, I would never use the word replicate. We ran tests.
What would be a better word for me to
Tests or experiments.
But this test wasn't, the conditions weren't set up similar to Ms. Baker's home to conduct this particular test. Is that correct?
No, but that's irrelevant. This fire is fuel limited. It's not ventilation limited. So, whether or not we conducted it in this room, in our lab, it's irrelevant.
Fair. Would it be relevant to determining the time that it took for the fire to go through the roof?
Can you be more specific?
Absolutely. And I may say the question wrong. Would the conditions be relevant when you're doing the fire test or the test to determine the the time that it took the fire to go from a small fire to a fire through Ms. Baker's roof? Would the conditions be relevant?
Yeah, and if you'll allow me. So
Absolutely.
If we were going to run a test on this, and there's reasons we didn't, but if we were going to run a test, we would want as best as possible to get the actual dimensions of the room of origin, the ancillary bathroom and closet, and that includes the footprint, the height. If we had the exact window, we've had cases where we've had fire in an apartment building, so we were able to get windows out of that particular apartment building and test them. So if we had the same window, then we can start to do some tests that are I'll say worthwhile. But because we didn't have the window and there are some other variables, we just relied on past data.
Okay, understood. Test 2 to 4 of the Kingston test involved gasoline use, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Baker's home, we agreed, did not involve any accelerant as far as gasoline.
That's my understanding. I don't think samples were ever taken.
Sure. Slide with the times on it, please.
There are lots of slides. With
Each one, the first one, if we could start with that one.
Okay.
And I'd like you to look at your screen for a second. Okay. And I'll be over here and I'll let you.
Okay.
So these times these aren't specific to Ms. Baker's home and the fire in her home, is that right?
No, they're specific to the Kinston test.
So these are Kinston test times, not times relevant to Ms. Baker.
That's correct.
Okay, next slide, please. And these times here, these aren't relevant to Ms. Baker's home. These are relevant to the Kingston test.
I wouldn't say they're not relevant. They're not specific to Ms. Baker's home, so they
Use that language.
Yeah.
Please forgive me. Next slide, please. And this time isn't specific to Ms. Baker's home, is that
That's correct.
Okay. Next slide, please. This time as well is not specific to Ms. Baker's home?
Correct.
Next slide, please. All right. I have no other questions for you. Thank you.
Any redirect, Mr. Yelman-Chile?
I think just one question, Judge. Are the type of fuel and ventilation factors that were present at 160 Fawn Drive the type that could lead to a longer period of time passing before flames come through a roof or observed to fall in?
Yeah, I would say they are. It's certainly possible. We did not have a couch or some nice vertical fuels like hanging drapes or something like that to get a really intense fuel-limited fire going very quickly. Ventilation was a huge issue. The hollow core door was, I think it's a hollow core door. The door was closed. The window was believed to be in the shut position. So that's a big issue. When do we get air to support this fire? We don't know anything about an incubation period, if there was one. And certainly a cycling HVAC system can keep a fire alive that would otherwise go out due to lack of ventilation. So, yeah, I think the conditions could support a long duration fire.
Judge, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Cruz, anything further, sir?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. May this witness be excused.
We'd ask that yes, Judge.
Any objection, Mr. Cruz?
No, ma'am.
You may step down and you are excused, sir.
At Exhibit 18.
All right, if you'll put that right there on the end of the desk. Thank you. Could I see counsel on the bench briefly, just for a minute?